We only have one child. Her name's Montana Hunter, and she just turned 23. So I got pregnant when I was 27, and I wanted a baby in the worst way. I really wanted to be a mom, and I was so excited to have a baby. And everything went pretty well until the last trimester. I started having problems and I started having very bad back pain was the main thing. And my OBGYN thought maybe it was because of the way the baby was laying, and it wasn't. Um, that was when my autoimmune disease reared its ugly head. It was in my last trimester that I didn't know I had an autoimmune disease. I had no idea. I was always healthy. I was always active. Um, Most women with autoimmune diseases do really, really well in pregnancy. I was the oddball, and so it was rough. It was really rough. I didn't sleep much last trimester. I was in a lot of pain. And when I went to my water broke, and I was not the frantic mother that was like, grab my things, we're going to the hospital, it's happening. I was like, just leave my stuff here because I'm sure I'm coming home. And I wouldn't let Ron take my stuff. And it was a really like wintry morning, even though she was born April 5th, 1998. It was really cold that morning, and I walked like Ron. I made Ron park. We walked into the ER, and they checked me, and they're like, "You're 4 centimeters," and I'm like, "Really?" I did not. I was in so much pain my last trimester that this was nothing. In fact, what I was only in labor for just a little bit, 22 minutes. 22 minutes I was in labor. And my doctor was like, this is the part you yell and scream at your husband. And there was no reaction from me. It did not faze me in the slightest bit. And 22 minutes was all I was in labor for, and she was born. And it was nothing. In fact, my OBGYN told me I was born to breed. So labor was nothing. But what came after it was really, really difficult because I was having really bizarre symptoms and I couldn't lay flat. I had anemia. I was breathless. I was having all of these symptoms. I was losing weight. I couldn't eat. I was so sick. So I had her April 5th of 98, and by July 5th of 1998, just a few months later, I was diagnosed with postpartum cardiomyopathy. And that was rough because I was in heart failure, and doctors couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong with me because some of my blood tests weren't matching that diagnosis. And I got out of the hospital and I went on with my life being sick and having a lot of help from my mom and dad because my husband had to keep working. I was useless. And It wasn't until she was a year old that I was actually properly diagnosed with one of the rarest autoimmune diseases called Takayasu's arteritis. So that involved going to Johns Hopkins. My mom and dad watched her a lot. I really, honestly, was not there for her for the first 2 years of her life. I was just too sick. And that was really hard because I wanted her so bad. I waited. I did all the proper things you're supposed to do. Wait till you have money, wait till you're old enough and your yayas are out. And I ended up getting this horrible autoimmune disease. So when I was finally diagnosed properly and I got on the right medication and I started feeling better and I could be a mother, there was a lot of guilt with that because I didn't bond with her. My mother was more her mother. And with that comes a lot of guilt. You have a lot of guilt, so you never say no. And that was very difficult being a sick mom. But she never knew anything different. So some days we were active, and other days we were just laying on the couch watching TV and doing things that we could just sit around. So I wasn't exerting energy. And it was really hard. Motherhood was very, very hard for me, being sick, because I felt like I missed out on so much because I wasn't there. I was too sick. So that was rough.
But do you think you kind of got a second chance with Pip?
Absolutely.
And tell people don't know who Pip is, so tell people.
Our daughter, Montana, is a single mother. She had her young, and I was not happy at first. I will be honest about that. But what can you do? Like, what can you do? And so her daughter, her real name is Charlotte Piper, but we call her Pippi LaRue because we believe she's part kangaroo. And she was so tiny when she was born. So she's our Pippi LaRue. And having Pippi gave me a second shot. I've been in remission for 10 years, and I got a second shot, kind of being her mother because of our daughter being so young when she had her, but not overstepping either, because I respect our daughter's decisions. So we got a second chance with Pippi LaRue, and it's been wonderful. And it's amazing how, also being a little bit older, you have more patience. You do. You may not have as much energy as when you were younger, but you definitely have more patience. And you know all the mistakes you made with your own, and you're so aware of that. You are so aware of just letting them be who they are.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I mean, I don't have to tell you how lucky you are to get that second chance that a lot of people don't get. But I love to watch you guys with her. It's so stinking cute.
I know.
So with all that, how do you think that motherhood has changed you as a person?
Well, that is the amazing thing about being sick young. Like, I think that humanity would be so much better if everybody got sick young in life rather than at the end of their life. Because when you get sick and you're very young, you really understand what it means to stop and smell the roses. You really understand, don't sweat the small stuff. Things that other people, my peers, have gone through. My husband and I were like, if only we had those problems. It's nothing in comparison to what we've been going through when I was really sick. And so our daughter benefited by that. we didn't get upset about her jumping on the couch. Like our peers would get upset about things their kids did, and it was like, this is no big deal. This is not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. So I think Montana benefited from us realizing how precious life is, and how every day is precious, that you never know, what could be your last day. So I think that actually benefited her. Does that make sense?
So obviously, uh, for a lot of us as moms, we're influenced by a lot of different people, good or bad. Tell me a little bit about your mom and how she influenced you. You know, I love me some Miss Cheryl. So, tell us a little bit about your mom and how she has influenced you, how she has helped you, some things maybe that she has taught you that you've kind of carried on with Montana.
My mom didn't have an easy life. She had a very abusive father, and so she left home at 13, 14 years old and became a nanny to a family, which is mind blowing to me that my mom, at 13, 14, that you would just leave your family, go be a nanny for a family you didn't even know. It just, you moved in with them and took care of their children and cooked for them and cleaned for them, and somehow managed to graduate high school at the same time. Like, that's just mind blowing to me that my mom was just so courageous. My mom knew at a very, very young age. She's always been wise beyond her years, but she knew from a very young age that abuse was wrong. It was wrong, and she did not want to be a part of it. So she left. And a lot of it too was, um, back in that day and age, my mom was born in 1950, women just tolerated a lot more than they do nowadays. So when my mom saw her mother chained to a kitchen table, and that was how she was expected to eat her dinner, that my mom was not going to be that person. She was just not. So her leaving, she was so courageous. She was so brave. I can't imagine just walking away at that age, no money, no, nothing. She had nothing. But, and she grew up like her father. I know this is like the strangest thing. She was not allowed to look in a mirror ever. There were no mirrors. They were not allowed to look in the mirror, especially women were not allowed to look in the mirror. So my mom left that and started her life, my gosh, way early, and graduated high school. And she's always been the opposite of what she grew up with. So I grew up with no fighting, no abuse, nothing like that. I had no chores because my mom wanted us to be kids. So she lived her childhood through us. Really, she did. By letting my brother and I, we didn't have as many rules as other kids. My mom was she wanted us to be honest. In fact, in my household, if you told the truth, you would not get punished. If you lied, you were in trouble. So my mom always wanted a dialogue with us. So every night we had dinner and we'd sit around and tell our stories of what happened to us at school. But my mom was also not a helicopter mother. Like, when you went to school, like in my day and age, your parents just sent you to school and it was their responsibility to take care of you. That wasn't her responsibility. Things have changed. Like you're saying, like the helicopter parent. My mom was not a helicopter parent. She really left us be kids because she knew she didn't have a childhood. So we had no chores. We had no responsibilities. We had just a childhood. And she's always been ahead of her time. She was always for Black rights, always for women's rights, always ahead of her time. But sometimes she's a little too serious. Sometimes. But I think it's because she had such a hard childhood. Sometimes she's a little serious. She lives in reality, she calls it. So she doesn't have much of a sense of humor. Not, she does and she doesn't. Like, she would never watch a comedy movie. She would never watch anything super funny. She's more of like real life, realistic. This is the way it is, you know?
Okay, so last question. What's one thing that you wish someone would have told you about motherhood? And Dana and I were laughing about this because our responses are all around childbirth. But definitely want to hear what's the one thing that you wish someone would have told you about motherhood?
Well, I have an issue with how corporations romanticize pregnancy and childbirth, and it's always this joyous, happy, it's always happy and joyous, and you know, it's not real. I wish somebody would have told me that. My heart broke so many times being a mom. So many times being a mom. Having a teenager is not easy. It it was not easy for me. I had a hard time with having a teenager. And how many times she broke my heart. How painful it is to corrupt them. And by that I mean her being a little kid and teaching her about stranger danger, teaching her that it's okay to grab her cell phone in elementary school and call somebody if there's a school shooter. The corruption of your child, because you have to warn them of what's really out in the world. And not everybody's friendly and not everybody's nice. I had a really hard time with that. Um, I remember us being outside and practicing with Montana if somebody was going to try to kidnap her, to get to the ground and hold on to their legs, wrap yourself around their feet to make it harder. And we practice this. If somebody tells you they have cats or dogs, don't go with them. All these things that you as a parent, and you're really corrupting them because they're so sweet and they're so innocent, and the world, what they've seen is friendly faces, and you have to tell them the realities of society, and that was just heart-wrenching to me. It was heart-wrenching. So I wish somebody would have told me how being a parent isn't this all romantic. I mean, even when I got pregnant, I was 27. I was old enough to probably know better, but there's still this part of me that was, that did romanticize it myself, that I thought everything was going to be peachy keen all the time, and it wasn't. And it's difficult to be a parent. It's very difficult to be a parent. And sometimes they disappoint you. And sometimes you have to admit how much you disappoint them.
Number one, as a parent, you're doing the best you can with what you have, right? With the tools that you have. And I feel like that that has helped me come to terms with a lot of things from my childhood, right? Like, you can grow up being pissed off at your parents for all kinds of things. But as an adult, as a parent, as somebody who has to juggle all of these things and all of our own emotions, right? And our own shortcomings, you're doing the best you can with what you have. So I think we all have to allow ourselves some grace when it comes to that, right? Like, yes, there will be times that we disappoint our kids, but that's okay, right? Yeah. Shows we're not perfect, we're vulnerable, right? And I think our kids need to see that sometimes, because we're always so busy putting on the superhero facade for our kids. But they also need to learn that it's okay to be on the other side of it, that it happens to everybody. right? So I definitely hear what you're saying. And you know, Alex, as a kid, the worst punishment for him, you could take away everything. The worst punishment for him is like for you to say, you disappointed me.
Yeah, but I've always been that kid too. I was always that kid too. If my mom ever said she was disappointed, that was like a sword to the heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That was hard. That was always hard to hear. I'd like to add one more thing about my mom too.
Yeah, definitely.
My mom was so selfless. She didn't care if she didn't have clothes. Everything went to the kids. Always. That's one quality I definitely got from my mom. I don't buy myself new clothes. It's so rare. I never got my hair professionally done, my nails done. I was never that kind of mom. Everything went to Montana. Everything went to Montana. Being selfless. I don't always think that's, you have to have some time for yourself. I don't, I definitely don't criticize moms that do that. I kind of wish I would have done some of that, where I would have maybe stepped back and did something for myself. But being selfless, that is another thing I learned from my mom. My mom was never a glamour girl. My mom went to the best meals she could give us. Money went to us having the best clothes, the best shoes, what they could afford. Never cared about how she looked. It never mattered to her. What mattered was seeing my brother and I happy, and that we had things, because she didn't have anything in childhood.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love your mom. She's so awesome.
I do love my mom. She's so awesome.
She's so great.
Awesome. She's always been so wise beyond her years.
Yeah.
She's like a sage. She always had a lot of good wisdom.
Yes. And her and your dad are just so super cute. Like, she's always gushing about him and the dog, and you, and your brother, and her grandkids. She loves you guys all.
Oh, yeah. We always knew we were loved. I grew up in a family where they said they loved us every day, like 200 times a day. We just for no reason. My mom would always say, "You are the apple of my eye. I love you."
Yes.
I love you. I was so fortunate to grow up in such a parents that actually love each other. My parents are best friends. Best friends.
Yeah.
And I was so fortunate to have that the warm, cozy nest where,
the safety of home.
Yeah, the safety of home. And I was able to tell my parents, and I did. I was a good kid. I really was a good kid. My brother, he gave them more trouble, but I was always wanted to be at home with my parents. It was always fun. My parents are fun people, like, watching movies together, doing things like that together. Yeah. So I was very lucky, the childhood I had. And it's amazing when they grow up and come out of that angsty, angry stage of being a teenager. They really can't help it. I think I wish I would have been a little softer on her as a teenager. I could not. I reacted every time she mouthed off to me. I really wish I was the parent that was just like, whatever, your brain's not even formed yet, whatever. I kind of wish I was more that, like, she bait me, because that's what teenagers do. They bait me. Don't go for it. And the other good advice that I never mastered was from a Muslim doctor that I used to see, who said, when your children are challenging you, you whisper to them instead of yelling, because they have to lean in. And never raise your voice above a whisper. Well, I'm incapable, like physically incapable of that. But if you possess that that superpower, you should try that.